James, who turned 18 in December 2025, is starting to get used to being a part of the royal family. He just finished school. James is the son of Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh, who is King Charles's youngest brother, and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. A very important moment is here. When it's officially decided and announced, the whole British royal family will change in a way no one could have guessed. Not from newspapers, TV shows, or even big speeches. There are good ways to fix these problems. No one could have guessed this big change. A young man who spent 18 years learning about power quietly without asking for it has made the most important choice of his time. James Alexander Philip Theo Mountbatten-Windsor, the Earl of Wessex, has said yes to being a prince. By doing this, he hasn't just taken a name, he's taken on a very special future. He has become the rightful person to carry on the work of Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. Prince Philip was like the quiet engine of the royal family, which is now strong and moving forward, not in trouble anymore. But here's an important question. Why is this moment so important? There have been princes before. There have been many royal family members throughout history. So, why is this young man at this exact time in 2026 making everyone around the world who watches the royals so excited? Stay with us. By the end of this story, you'll understand that saying yes to this title isn't just a rule. It's like completing a circle that started when Prince Philip first took a young James fishing by the River Dee at Balmoral. It's keeping a promise that was made quietly, honored by serving, and sealed by the most important royal duty this generation has seen. The importance of the name. Let's start with his name because every part of it has meaning. James Alexander Philip Theo. The name Philip is there on purpose. His family knew even when he was born that this child was special. Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, was a very important person in the modern British royal family for over 70 years. He was the man truly in charge behind the scenes. He shaped how the family worked, made sure they followed rules and kept their standards high. The newspapers didn't always like him, and people didn't always understand him. But he was, without a doubt, the strong support for a royal family that has lasted longer than many powerful countries. When James has the name Philip, it's not just for show. It's a promise. And when you look at this young man, now 18, about to become an official prince, you see that promise being kept fully. Think about this. Of all Queen Elizabeth II's grandchildren, of all the children who grew up around that amazing couple, why was it James? The youngest, the quietest, the one kept out of public view on purpose, who learned the most important lessons from Prince Philip's way of thinking. Why was it James who spent those long, cold afternoons at Balmoral learning how to fly fish? This is a special, old hobby that teaches patience, quietness, and being very aware of nature. The other grandchildren had their own relationships with their grandfather, their own memories, and their own things they learned. But the connection between Philip and James was different. It was almost like the old Duke saw in the youngest of the family a personality most like his own. The choice that changes a generation. Now let's talk about the actual choice, because James Alexander accepting the title of His Royal Highness isn't as simple as it seems. Based on the current royal rules, the choice was completely his. He didn't have to become a prince just because he turned 18. He was allowed to, but deciding to do it was a personal, thought-out, and completely voluntary act. And that's what makes this moment so exciting. Ask yourself this. When was the last time you saw a young man with a lot of advantages choose not to take something that was easily available to him? When was the last time the person who could get one of the most powerful names in history basically said, "I will take this title when the royal family needs me to, not when I want to be famous"? That's exactly what James did. For years after he was old enough, the whispers in the important royal circles, Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, and Kensington Palace, were always the same. James was waiting. He was watching. He was learning. And he was refusing to rush towards power just because it was there for the taking. This is the main difference between James Alexander and almost every other royal story that has been in the news for the last 10 years. The stories that everyone talked about for years were about the opposite. Demanding things, claiming things, announcing things, and insisting on being noticed. What we are seeing now in the spring of 2026 is the opposite of all that. It's quiet, it's thought out, it's surprisingly grown up, and it's changing what it means to be a prince in the 21st century. How a prince is made, Sophie's clever plan. We can't talk about James without talking about the woman who everyone who knows about the royals in Britain agrees is the real reason for his amazing character. Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh. She was once called the late Queen's favorite daughter-in-law in the palace. She made a decision at the very start of her marriage to Prince Edward that was so new and so against the usual royal rules that it surprised people everywhere, from Buckingham Palace to St. James's Palace. Sophie and Edward decided that their children would not be called His or Her Royal Highness. They wouldn't have prince or princess titles when they were kids. They would be raised as the children of an earl, down-to-earth, normal in the best way, able to live in the real world without the special treatment that a royal title gives. Why does this matter? Because it means that for the first 18 years of his life, James Alexander had to earn his place everywhere he went. He couldn't rely on a fancy title to open doors or make people respect him. He had to use his brain, his good manners, his character, and really connect with the world around him. He rode public buses. He waited in lines. He learned to talk to people from all walks of life without the invisible wall of being royal separating him from normal human experiences. Can you understand what that does to a person's mind? Can you see the difference between a child who grows up being told, "You are a prince, the world will come to you," and a child who is told, "You are a citizen with a special family history, and you will have to prove you are worthy of it every single day"? That is the strong base James Alexander was built on, and it is a base of solid rock. Sophie's cleverness, and make no mistake, it is cleverness, was in understanding that the royal family of the future wouldn't last based on old myths. It would need real people, people who understood the world, people who had actually lived in it rather than just waving from a balcony. By raising James the way she did, Sophie created exactly that. She created a royal who is real because he has been tested by real life. And now, as he steps forward to take on the full importance of his title and his family history, that realness is his strongest quality. Heir to Philip, the fishing lessons that built a future. Let's go back to Balmoral because the story of James and Prince Philip, the grandfather and grandson who shared a personality that skipped some generations, is key to understanding why accepting this title is so much more than just an announcement. Fly fishing, for those who don't know, sounds like a calm, outdoor hobby, the kind of thing a rich man does on a nice afternoon. In reality, it is one of the most challenging and thoughtful activities in the British upper-class tradition. To fly fish well, you have to stand in very cold water for hours. You have to figure out the exact speed of the water under your feet, the wind's direction, the angle of the sunlight on the water, and the small movements of nature around you. You have to be perfectly, absolutely silent, not just with your body, but with your mind. Any wiggling, any impatience, any noise, and the fish are gone. The river tells you nothing unless you are quiet enough to listen. Prince Philip understood this. He used fly fishing not just as a sport, but as a way to help build character. And it was during those long, quiet afternoons on the banks of the River Dee, with the cold water and the crisp Highland air smelling of heather and pine, that the old Duke found in his youngest grandson the student he had perhaps been waiting for his entire life. James learned everything. The patience, the silence, carefully watching his surroundings, understanding that you don't fight the current. You observe it, you respect it, and you work with its natural flow instead of against it. This is not just a comparison, it is a direct inheritance. The calm presence the world now sees when James stands at a royal event, that steady, unshakable poise that surprised experienced royal reporters at recent big events, is the same calm he learned on that river. The way his eyes move through a room, taking everything in, not rushing to judge anything. That is the same focused attention that fly fishing requires. Prince Philip, through those quiet lessons at Balmoral, didn't just teach James how to fish. He taught him how to lead. And there is something deeply touching about that connection. Philip is gone now. The world felt sad for him. The royal family felt the absence of his strong leadership in ways they are still dealing with. But in James Alexander, there is a direct line of what was passed down, not just by family, but by character, by discipline, by way of thinking. When James accepts the title of prince, he is truly completing a handoff that began beside a cold Scottish river, and was meant from the very beginning to last longer than the man who started it. The vigil that changed everything. There is one image from recent royal history that, more than any other, shows who James Alexander truly is. If you haven't seen it, you need to understand what happened at Westminster Hall during Queen Elizabeth II's lying in state. In that huge, old room, surrounded by the most important members of the royal family and watched live by tens of millions of people around the world, the grandchildren of the late queen stood guard over her coffin. James was 14 years old. Think about that for a moment. 14 years old in the full spotlight of the most closely watched royal event of the 21st century, standing guard over the body of his grandmother, the woman who had been the most famous person on earth for 70 years. The emotional pressure of that moment, the sadness, the seriousness, the immense weight of history in that room, was something that has made even experienced leaders visibly upset. And here was a 14-year-old boy. He didn't fidget, he didn't look around, he didn't show the shyness that any normal teenager would have shown in that situation. He stood with his head bowed and his face showing complete respectful concentration. He wasn't pretending to be calm. He wasn't pretending to be older than he was. He was simply doing what his character and upbringing had prepared him to do. He was honoring a duty. He was representing his family line. He stood as a soldier stands, not for himself, but for something much, much bigger than himself. That moment was seen by millions, and for those who were paying attention, the serious royal experts, the palace insiders, the people who study royal rules, it was the moment that changed how James Alexander was talked about forever. This was not a child being put on display. This was a serious young man stepping into a role with a seriousness that seemed too much for a 14-year-old, but was clearly and powerfully there. From that moment on, the question was no longer whether James would play an important role in the royal family. The question became exactly how important. The South Africa tour, a prince without a title. Let's fast forward to his recent worldwide appearance, the South African tour. This trip was the world's formal introduction to a young man who had spent his whole life getting ready for exactly this kind of moment, even though he didn't have an official royal title yet. James's behavior on that tour was watched very closely, the way people usually watch experienced leaders of countries. And what people saw was someone who, in every important way, was already acting at the level his new title now confirms. What observers noticed again and again was a pattern that went against everything expected of a young royal. Instead of putting himself at the center of conversations, which would have been perfectly fine for someone of his status, James repeatedly took a step back. He stayed on the edge of interactions. He listened. His eyes moved through the room with a quiet, smart focus, reading how people felt, checking the emotional mood, understanding how every conversation worked before saying a single word. In diplomatic circles, this skill is called active listening. It's one of the most advanced skills for important international meetings. Most professionals take years to learn it. Many never fully master it. Some of the most experienced diplomats in the world, people who have spent 30 years dealing with presidents and foreign ministers, admit that true active listening is hard because the pressure of the situation constantly makes them focus on themselves. How they look, what they'll say next, how they are being seen. James used it naturally, instinctively, as part of his personality rather than a learned trick. When he did speak, it wasn't with a rehearsed polite phrase or a formal greeting. It was with a specific, thoughtful comment that showed he truly understood and cared about what the other person had said. The effect was amazing. Leaders in conservation, who had met many royals over the years, left those meetings clearly impressed by how well James listened. Local community leaders, who expected the slightly distant politeness of official visits, found themselves in what felt like a real conversation with someone who genuinely wanted to understand their world. Experienced journalists covering the tour found themselves, almost against their professional habits, writing not about what James said or did, but about the quality of his presence, something almost impossible to measure and almost impossible to fake. This is the result of Sophie's parenting and Philip's fishing lessons, combined and shown in a young man who understands that the most powerful thing a royal representative can offer is not their title, but their real, complete human connection. There's another part of the South Africa tour that's important to notice, because it directly shows why the palace has been so careful and smart in how it's presented James. During the tour, James was not called a prince. He attended as the son of the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh in his role as the Earl of Wessex, an important noble title, but one that doesn't automatically get the same respect as His Royal Highness. And yet, in room after room, conversation after conversation, the people he met treated him with a respect and genuine warmth that no title had created. He earned it right then and there. His character commanded it. This is exactly what Sophie planned 2 decades ago when she and Edward made their revolutionary decision about how their children would be raised. And in South Africa, watching it happen on the world stage, the palace knew for sure that the plan had worked even better than anyone had hoped. Filling the gap, the new way of royal loyalty. Let's talk directly about what everyone who watches the royals has been discussing more and more openly. When the Duke and Duchess of Sussex left, it caused a big problem for the British monarchy that was more than just personal feelings. It caused a shortage of people at a time when the royal family was under a lot of pressure. The working royal family, the main group of people who do thousands of charity works, appearances, trips overseas, and official duties that are the daily life of the crown, was left with a big empty space. For years, different solutions were talked about. Different people were considered. Different changes were made, but none of them fully fixed the main problem, which wasn't just about numbers, but about character. The monarchy needed a young royal who was both genuinely popular with the public and completely loyal to the institution. Someone who could be trusted not just with a charity or a foreign trip, but with the long-term strength of the royal family itself. The palace has found that person. And the amazing, almost poetic thing is that they found him not by looking for new people or new agreements, but by looking right at the young man who had been quietly, carefully getting ready for exactly this role his entire life. James isn't replacing anyone. He isn't a substitute or a consolation prize. He is, in the opinion of those closest to King Charles III and the Prince of Wales, the better choice. Not because of what others lacked, but because of what he uniquely has. What does he have? Let's be specific. He has the calm strength and loyalty to the institution that Prince Philip had. He has the down-to-earth, real-world understanding that comes from 18 years of living a normal life as a private citizen. He has a scientific and analytical mind that helps him deal with the most important issues of the modern world. Climate science, defense technology, environmental engineering, making institutions work better. He can talk about these with real understanding, not just polite royal talk. He has a relationship with the Prince of Wales that people inside the palace say is the most important partnership in the current royal family. A partnership of real mutual respect and shared goals that is like the bond William has long looked for and never quite found elsewhere. And very importantly, he has the carefulness that the modern royal family relies on. He hasn't told his story to a streaming service. He hasn't sat in front of a camera and shared his feelings for the whole world to see. He has lived his life quietly, served his family faithfully, and let his character show through his actions rather than his words. In a time when everything is so open and that has often weakened royal power, James has kept the mystery. He has kept things private, and by doing so, he has, strangely, become the most interesting person in the royal family. The STEM Prince. Why James is the monarchy's greatest modern asset. Here's something that the news stories about James Alexander have often not reported enough, and it's perhaps the most important part of his profile for the royal family's long-term future. James is not just a handsome young royal with good manners and a talent for ceremonies. He is a truly smart young man with a deep, serious interest in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This matters a great deal. Think about the problems the British monarchy faces in the 21st century. It must show it's still important to people who are more and more doubtful about inheriting special rights. It must credibly deal with the big issues of our time: climate change, new technologies, changes in world power, environmental problems. It must work, as King Charles III has always said, like a highly effective organization, not just an old decoration. To do these things, the working royal family needs members who don't just lend their names to good causes, but who actually understand what those causes involve at a technical and strategic level. James is that member. His interest in conservation, for example, isn't just the pretty, easy engagement with cute animals that some famous environmentalists have. It's a careful, engineering-focused approach to ecosystems as complex systems that need to be understood, modeled, and managed with exact data. His interest in the military isn't just a love for fancy uniforms and old army stories. It's a thoughtful, analytical engagement with defense systems, supply networks, and the technical equipment that protects national security. When James sits in a meeting, he doesn't need everything explained in simple terms. He brings his own way of thinking to the discussion. King Charles III has recognized this with what people inside the palace describe as a quiet but strong feeling of relief. The king, who has spent decades supporting causes that were often called strange before the world finally caught up with his ideas on organic farming, old buildings, and caring for the environment, now has in his nephew a young man who shares his serious intellect and brings it to a new generation, speaking the language of the digital age fluently. James is the link between the king's wisdom and the world's future. William's right-hand man, the partnership that will define the next reign. The relationship between James Alexander and the Prince of Wales is the most important part of everything that is about to happen. To understand it, you need to understand what William has been dealing with for the past several years. The future king of the United Kingdom is a man of great ability and true dedication. But he is also a man who has been managing an increasingly complicated royal family with fewer close advisors. The family he grew up in, close, complicated, sometimes broken, has left him in a position where the question of whom he trusts completely, whom he can talk to honestly, whom he can rely on to put the royal family first over their own fame and personal story, has never been more urgent. James is the answer to that question. The age difference between them, nearly 2 decades, might seem big, but in the way royal relationships are built, it's almost perfectly right. James is young enough to learn from William, to respect his authority without competing, to genuinely look up to the future king as a teacher and a role model. But he is old enough and mature enough to offer real strategic support, to be a true intellectual partner rather than just a respectful junior. This balance is extremely rare, and William has recognized it with the clear understanding of a man who has been searching for it for a long time. Sources within the palace suggest that William has taken a personal and direct interest in James's development that goes beyond the formal relationship of an older royal guiding a younger one. He sees in James the younger brother in spirit that he lost. Not a replacement for what was, but a fulfillment of what the role of the loyal royal sibling was always meant to be. Where previous people in that role were driven by personal ambition or changing emotions, James brings something to it that William has been quietly desperate for. Complete, conscious, freely chosen loyalty, based not on obligation, but on genuine belief in the royal family and genuine love for the man who will lead it. When William eventually becomes king, and that change, whenever it happens, will be one of the most closely watched moments in modern British history, he will not face it alone. He will face it with James by his side. And the world will see what the palace already knows, that the most important alliance in the British monarchy is not between a king and his advisors or between a monarch and the news, but between a king and the man who chose freely, purposefully, against all the temptations of a private life, to stand beside him. Think about past events for a moment, because they are helpful and serious. The great royal families of history, the ones that lasted, were never built on just one amazing person. They were built on systems of loyal support, on the relationships between rulers and their most trusted inner circle that kept the institution strong through the unavoidable difficulties. The House of Windsor has understood this idea for decades. In James, it now has it in practice. A young man of royal blood, royal training, and most importantly, genuine personal belief in the value of what the crown stands for. That combination hasn't existed in the second tier of the royal family for a very long time, and the palace knows it. That's precisely why James Alexander's rise has been handled with such deliberate, unhurried care. You don't rush the placement of a main support beam. You make sure it's perfectly positioned before you put the full weight of the structure on it. James is positioned, the weight is coming, and from everything the world has seen, he is more than ready to bear it. The title accepted. What happens now? So what does it mean in real terms now that James Alexander has officially accepted the His Royal Highness title and taken on the role of prince? What changes? What begins, and what does it tell us about the next part of the House of Windsor's story? First and most immediately, it finishes the official structure that King Charles III has been building since he became king. A smaller royal family focused on a core group of working royals who carry the full weight of the institution's public duties has always been the king's goal. James's official entry into that inner circle provides the strong support that the working royal family has needed. He is not a minor figure being added to a list. He is a main support pillar being put into the foundation. Second, it starts a lot of official responsibilities, charity roles, military connections, and diplomatic duties that will begin to be given to James from the existing royal work. His science and technology background makes him the natural champion for the most important charity roles for the monarchy's modern relevance. Environmental science, defense technology, educational innovation, and keeping infrastructure strong. These are not just for show. They are active, involved partnerships between the crown and the organizations that are building the future of this country. Third, and perhaps most deeply, it sends a message to the British public and to the wider Commonwealth that goes far beyond just one person. It says that the monarchy can renew itself, not because of a crisis or outside pressure, but because of careful, principled, long-term strategic thinking. It says that there are young people within the royal family who understand what service means, not as a way to look good or for personal fame, but as a true, complete commitment of one's life to something bigger than oneself. The verdict of history, what James means for the future. James Alexander accepting the title of prince is not the end of a story. It is the beginning of one. And history, when it looks back on this moment from many decades away, will recognize it as one of the most important turning points in how the British monarchy has changed in the 21st century. Here is Prince Philip's legacy made new. Here is the calm strength, the technical mind, the fierce loyalty to the institution, the absolute refusal to be defined by fame or personal stories. All of it alive in a young man who inherited it not just through blood, but through those long, cold, silent afternoons on the river. Through a mother's brave and new decision to raise her son as a regular citizen before a prince, and through his own conscious, deliberate, daily choice to prepare himself for a duty that nobody was making him take on. Here is the answer to every question the monarchy has faced about its importance, its ability to last, and its capacity to change without losing its core values. Not in noise, not in arguments, not in the made-up drama of overseas stories and streamed confessions. Here in the quiet, focused, absolutely dedicated young man who has just accepted a title he earned before he ever officially held it. What should not be forgotten is the cultural message that James's acceptance of the title sends to a whole generation of young people who have grown up watching the British monarchy go through its most difficult time since the abdication crisis. For many of them, the main royal story of the past 10 years has been about privilege versus escape, of people born into extraordinary advantages either holding on to them or running away from them, but in both cases, always defined by it. James offers something very different. He offers the story of a person who had every reason to live a comfortable, private life with no obligations, and who chose, fully aware of the cost, to give that life in service of something larger. That is not a story of privilege. It is a story of sacrifice. And in a world that is tired of the first and desperately needs the second, it is a story that touches deeper than any newspaper headline can show. The palace, to its credit, has understood this. The careful raising of James has not been done as a public relations stunt. It has not been dressed up in the language of celebrity or aimed for maximum social media attention. It has been allowed to happen naturally, at the speed that James's own growth has decided, in the quiet, respectful manner that has always been his natural way. The world has been watching, and what it has seen, what it is still seeing as the effects of this title acceptance continue to spread through the centers of power, is a young man who makes the idea of duty seem not like a burden but like a calling. That is Prince Philip's ultimate legacy. Not the titles, not the charity roles, not the decades of official service, extraordinary as all of that was. The ultimate legacy is passing on a way of thinking, a way of being in the world that values inner discipline over outside praise, that finds meaning in responsibility rather than recognition. That understands that the worth of a life is not how much attention it got, but how much real good it achieved in the quiet places where cameras never reach. That way of thinking has now found its next guardian, and his name is James Alexander Philip Theo Mountbatten-Windsor. James Alexander Philip Theo Mountbatten-Windsor, the prince who chose duty, the heir to Philip's legacy, the quiet protector of the crown's future, the helper who will make a king feel less alone on the throne. Do you understand now why this moment matters? Do you see why the royal watching world is not just observing this story, but holding its breath in something that feels remarkably close to hope? Because the truth is, the monarchy has not just gained a prince today. The country has gained a guarantee. A guarantee that when the next chapter of this ancient institution begins, when the crown passes, when a new king stands in that moment of greatest vulnerability and greatest responsibility, There will be a man standing beside him who has spent his entire life preparing to be exactly what the throne needs. Not its heir, not its rival, but its most trusted ally, its strongest support, its quiet, strong, absolutely dedicated foundation. The British monarchy has survived 800 years of wars, revolutions, kings stepping down, and social unrest. It has survived because in each generation, it has found the person it needed precisely when it needed them. In the spring of 2026, it has found James Alexander, and the House of Windsor, quiet, focused, and absolutely dedicated, moves forward. The prince who stayed is now officially a prince, and the future of the crown has never been more certain. If you've made it this far, you already know that this story is far from over. The real parts are just beginning. Hit that subscribe button because as James steps further into his official role in the months ahead, every development is going to be worth watching, and you don't want to miss a single moment of what comes next.